UFOs, monsters, mysteries. You're listening to Talking Weird. And now, from a cabin deep in the Northwoods, your hosts, Dr. Dean Bertram and Jen Durrell.
Well, hey, baby.
Hey, baby.
I'm always reluctant to ask you these days because I know it's semi-secretive, but you told me today a couple of stories about your work as far as a paranormal kind of some sensations you had. Did you want to share any of those for the audience members who were following that?
Well, I mean, it really didn't have a whole lot today because I wasn't in the building too much, but you know, every once in a while I get odd feelings and feel like something's heavy on me and I can't breathe and, you know, ringing in the ears. So it's neat when it happens. So from now on, I'm just going to document it just to, you know, see if it correlates with anything.
I think that's probably a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
Save it for the memoirs as well that way.
Hey, you never know.
Well, I'm really excited about tonight's guest. He's somebody that I know you've wanted to have on for a while. I think we talked about having one, I don't know, months ago, and we finally got around to it, which is great. So tonight's guest has over 25 years of field investigations and large-scale expeditions, as his reputation as a serious researcher into the Bigfoot field has grown exponentially. It all started when he was in the military and he had this rather strange and significant sighting of, I believe it was 3 large bipedal creatures. Anyway, I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit with him anyway. And he's been called upon for numerous public speaking engagements, as well as countless interviews and television appearances. Together with his wife and fellow researcher, Diane Neiss, they have consolidated their research and formed the American Primate Conservancy, a non-profit science and educational foundation predicated on the discovery, knowledge, research, recognition, and protection of Sasquatch. So I'm delighted to welcome tonight's guest, Todd Neiss. Todd, welcome to Talking Weird.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And thank you for your service as well.
Yes.
Oh, my honor, really.
Maybe that's where we should start. Maybe we should go back to your service experience when you had your first Bigfoot encounter, which really kind of launched you, I suppose, onto this incredible journey.
Well, indeed. My baptism, if you were, my initiation into what they call Bigfooting began rather abruptly. I should probably preference this by saying that I've been born and raised in the Pacific Northwest, lived here all my life, and it goes without saying that one doesn't live in this neighborhood without hearing tales of Bigfoot or Sasquatch, if you will. And, you know, I certainly am no exception, but, you know, having hunted and fished and hiked in the area a lot in my life, and I just really never had seen any evidence, and I didn't really give any credence to this legend, if you will. And I kind of relegated it to that of a campfire ghost story, if you will, to spook kids around a campfire, you know, keep them close, right? And so I guess you would say I was more or less agnostic. It's just, I didn't carry the way. I didn't believe they exist, but you know, it had to be one of those I'd have to see it to believe it kind of things. And well, I can check that off the list, get the T-shirt, I guess, because it was it involves the military initially, in so much as at the time, and I'm talking April 3rd, 1993, I was a combat engineer in the Oregon Army National Guard. And for your viewers who may not know what combat engineers do, a lion's share of what we do involves the use of explosives, different types of explosive, different scenarios. Our mission is mobility, counter mobility. We get people in where we need to get them, and we stop the enemy from going necessarily where they want to go, and we use explosives to do that. And so on this particular day, it was a fairly nice day in April in the Coast Range, the Oregon Coast Range. And we had special permission to go into some private timberland and utilize these rock quarries. They had gravel quarries throughout their fairly vast holdings throughout the Clatsop County. And they would allow us once a year to go in and do some very large scale explosions, if you will. And we'd use those quarries in order to contain the explosions and not rattle the neighbors. And we could do it without, starting a forest fire if we use those quarries. So they let us use those quarries. We had 3 different blast sites, if you will. And we had detonated the first 2 sites, and this was the last one of the day that we needed to get done. It was a cratering charge involving some 250 pounds of ammonium nitrate that we'd been soaking in diesel fuel for a couple hours. And so the cratering charge is used to essentially blow a road in half. And deny the enemy the use of that egress. So we got the charge in the ground, and we primed the fuses, and when we're ready, we set the charges, and we had about 11 minutes, it's pretty average, to get into our convoy and get out of there, get to a safety staging area where we'd wait for the explosion, and then go back and check our work. This particular case, we had 4 vehicles, 2 Humvees up front, a troop transport in the center. The commander's Humvee was coming in the rear. And so I happened to be a passenger in that second Humvee. And so, again, it was a nice day. This is an area I hunted quite frequently. So it's just natural for me to, as long as I'm not driving on this winding, logging road, I had the opportunity to look around the countryside. And I'm always looking, for deer, elk, bear, whatever. And so this is what I was doing. And I had the window down, and we rounded this corner, a very slow sweeping corner to the right. And in an instant, the second quarry, the one that we had detonated our explosives perhaps an hour earlier, came into full view. And I'm looking down at this quarry, and I see these 3 dark silhouettes, which, right off the bat, our standard operating procedure is that we have what we call 100% integrity. Everybody is counted for. We don't have people wandering around onesies, twosies, obviously, just because of the danger or the seriousness of what we're doing. And so I see these 3 figures, and the first thought that came to my head instantly was, what the heck are those people doing down there? Frankly, they were potentially within range of being hit by shrapnel from this 250-pound bomb we got cooking off behind us. So that was a concern. And so as I'm looking at them, I hardly got the thought out of my head, what the heck are these people doing here? It was like, wait a minute, something's not right. And as I'm looking at them, and they were obviously watching our convoy across the ravine. They stood, shoulder to shoulder, 3 across. I'm like, there's something not right. The dimensions were wrong. The arms were far too long, reaching down between their knees and their ankles, just seemed out of place. And the legs as well were disproportionately long for a human. And also their physique. I mean, these look like three huge bodybuilders. I mean, massive shoulders and a barreled chest that tapered down to the waist. The head sat squarely on the shoulders, and you couldn't really even make out a neck. It was like the trapezoids went from their ears to their shoulder, just massive. I wish they played on my favorite football team, but it was obvious they weren't wearing any clothing or a uniform or anything. They were, like I say, jet black, and standing against the backdrop of this basalt, almost a concrete gray, sort of light gray background. The contrast made them stand out even more so. But then what really caught my eye was that the largest one, the one in the middle, stood there like a statue, while the two on either side of it exhibited this peculiar swaying motion, rocking left to right, like they were just shifting weight from one foot to the other. In the process, these long pendulous arms were swaying below their knees. And I should point out, this was not a typical 3 to 5 seconds, something ran in front of the car. I think it was a Bigfoot. This was a full 25-second view. And I realize that doesn't sound very long, but I mean, I would ask your viewers to stare at their watch for 25 seconds. It's a lifetime, especially when you're looking at what I was observing. But that entire time, in that 25-second view, these two, either side of the larger one, which I estimate to be about 9 feet tall, they just continued this back and forth, rocking back and forth. And so 25 seconds elapsed, and we turned in a position where I lost sight of them, and I just fell back in my seat, and I'm kind of in shock. I'm trying to make sense of it. I mean, did I really see what I just saw? But you can't unsee it, right? I mean, it's like I can see it as clearly if I close my eyes right now as if I was there, and it gets burned into your memory. And I just it just blew me away because of all the time I'd spent out there in the woods, those woods in particular, and to think the entire time I was there, these things were out there, and I had no concept of it, and so that was my big epiphany. It to this day baffles me that how 25-second experience changed my life from that, 28 years plus. Just 25 seconds. And I mean, had anybody told me that something like that was possible, I'm like, I can't imagine what would do that. Well, now I can. But just to follow up, we got down to the staging area, and I just instinctively jumped out of the Humvee and started jogging back up the road the direction we had came, in hopes of getting another view of them. And I went as far as I dared. I quickly realized that I was, had I gone any further, I would be out of sight of the main movement element, and that was no. That was everybody had to be not only accounted for but in sight, and for me to run out of view of the group, it would be big trouble for me. But I got as far as I dared, and I stood on my tiptoes. I'm trying to see over this bit of a knoll that blocked my view. So here I am standing like this, trying to strain to see something. And right about that time, I heard somebody yell out my name. And I looked to my right, and here comes Sergeant Martin. And he says, "Hey, what are you looking at?" And I said, "Oh, nothing." And I dropped my hand to my side, and he continued up to where I was at. He was smoking on a cigarette, and He kind of looked left and right and took a drag off a cigarette, and he says, "I don't suppose you saw what I saw down at that second blast site." And not wanting to be the first to say it, I said, "I don't know, Jeff, what did you see?" And again, he kind of looked around, made sure nobody else was listening, and he says, "I saw 3 huge, hair-covered, I don't know, Bigfoot, I guess." And I said, "Yeah, dude, I saw them too." You know, and I really didn't need Jeff's corroboration to validate what I'd seen, but it was nice to know that somebody had experienced the same thing. I mean, you kind of like suddenly bonded brothers or something. Yeah. And, again, at that time I was in the National Guard, and a traditional guard will meet 1 week in the month, do a 2-week training in the summer, but we all have 9 to 5 jobs otherwise. And so our next drill, as they call it, would be early May. And as it turned out, we had 2 more soldiers come forward, independent of each other, and had admitted that they had seen them as well. And who knows how many other people may have. A lot of people keep this stuff, to themselves, but that's what makes this sighting, I think, a little more unique than others, in that multiple animal sightings are fairly rare. Multiple eyewitnesses are rare. And then, of course, just the nature of what we were doing. We were rocking their world with these explosions. And so anyway, those elements combined just make it somewhat unique compared to some others, but no more important. But anyway, that's how I got into this, and I have just been, you might say, obsessed since then. Again, not to prove it to myself, but what I'd like to do is to, of course, on a personal level, I'd like to see them again. I mean, no doubt about it, but on a more scientific or historical level, I think it's important that these things ultimately be classified, scientifically classified, so that if necessary, we can enact some protections. If not, that's fine. But in the meantime, we don't know the health of their species. We don't know really how many there are today, or for that matter, how many there were 100 years or 1,000 years ago. So we don't know if their population is in decline or doing just fine. But I'd rather err on the side of caution, and they're obviously elusive, and they're few and far between. So, I mean, if we saw them every day, that'd be one thing. But I just think there's a reason why I saw what I did, and I've looked for that purpose, and I think I found it in this conservancy, and so that's what we're about. That's how I got involved, and it's just been an amazing adventure ever since.
As somebody who's ex-military, I know there's obviously the popular belief that there's some kind of cosmic Watergate when it comes to the true story of UFOs, but I've heard a few people bandy about the idea that the US government are aware of the existence of Sasquatches, and there's some kind of secret cover-up when it comes to that as well. Is that something you've ever encountered or heard about?
Well, yeah, of course the subject's been raised. I'm not a big conspiratorialist, so to speak. We know here in a few weeks the U.S. government's coming forward with some data about the UFO, and which they've been reluctant to do. I have no doubt. I mean, it's not like, they'd have to have their head in the sand not to know what people are talking about, what people are seeing, and I have no doubt they're aware of them. I guess, and I would put this kind of in the same category as the UFO phenomenon. as a leader, you're privy to a lot of intelligence that most people do not know. There's certain things that are classified, and for various reasons. And in the case of Bigfoot, or UFOs, if you will, I think as a person in authority, you got to put these things on a scale, okay? And you have to say, what is in the best interest?
Yeah.
We've got a lot of things with terrorism and economic and religious issues and whatnot. Do we really need to add this to the equation? And I think on balance, perhaps it's. I think, like I say, I'm really surprised they're coming forward with this UFO phenomena, and I'll be interested to see how that comes out. Do they know about this? I have no doubt. I guess it just comes down to a matter of what is best. What are the consequences, I guess, of revealing things that people A, may not be ready for, or B, especially in today's climate with the pandemic and everything, do we really need to heap this on top of everything?
Yeah.
Of course, that hasn't always been the case, but still, I think they've got to just kind of weigh it out and go, let's just, this one we just kind of need to, keep on the back burner, and unless it's absolutely necessary. That's just my guess. I don't think they're intentionally trying to hide anything. They're just intentionally deciding not to say something. It just could lead to a lot of pandemonium, if you will, and again, that's part of what the Conservancy is about. It's just, right now, I mean, if they came out with this, the information they have, which I no doubt believe they do, it's going to be open season, right? I mean, there's a lot of us good-natured people that just say, "Hey, that's awesome," let's let it go on. But there's others who would take advantage of it, and I think that probably weighs in as well. And let's face it, right now it is open season, and that's why we're trying to get protections in place. And one of the ways I've tried to do this, I know of a few people, colleagues that have tried to enact protections for these things, both here in the States and in Canada, and they've fallen flat. Never even got a hearing. Surprise, surprise. But I have done a great deal of research into the Native American or First Nations aspect of this, because, let's face it, we as Europeans have been here in this area, 300 years, give or take. Native Americans have been here for 19,000 years so far that we've been able to determine. So I look at that. Let's see, 300 years, 19,000 years. I mean, who do you think really has the most information on these things than the people that have had to live symbiotically with them over the years? And it's part of their culture, and there's plenty of information when you dig for it, and if you can get them to open up about it. And so I've put together a draft initiative for tribes, specifically reservations where they have their own autonomy. Forget about going to the Interior Department that runs, Fish and Wildlife and the Forest Service and all that. Forget about going to non-native people. Let's go to the source. Let's go to these people who it's part of their culture. It's been part of their culture all this time. And certainly, it helps fortify the culture that everybody's kind of, poo-pooed over the years, and also will help to put in place some protections for them, and the natives, the Native Americans, these especially like I say on the reservations, they have autonomy. They make their own fish and game rules. You know, the federal government has nothing to do with it. So if they start doing this on an individual or tribal basis, I should say, I think it'll catch on. I'm working with 5 different native tribes right now, from Alaska to Nebraska and Oregon and Washington as well. And if we can get them to sign on to this, then it's going to make it easier sell down the road to, say, the Department of Interior or the Canadian version of that. But yeah, like I say, they may be fine, they may be healthy, they may be doing good, but until we get the data, let's just assume that perhaps that's not the case, and it can't hurt to do that. It really can't.
Yeah. So, what is the legends of the Native American tribes that you're talking with? What are their stories behind?
Well, it's so a lot of people would ask, you know, is this an ape? Is this human or hominid? And through my research, through on the Native American lore, there almost every tribe, and this is nationwide, and this includes the Canadian provinces. These tribes all have different names for them, whether it's Bigfoot. Well, Bigfoot is obviously a European name that was started in 1958 when casts started coming out of Northern California. But Sasquatch, again, was kind of anglicized. It was Sasquatch from the Salish language in British Columbia. There's Dasanaquah, Bakwas, it's the Yaha, Skookum, Oma. I mean, in Nebraska, where I just came back from doing some field research, they call it Satonga, but they all describe the same beings, we'll just say. But what's interesting with the Native Americans, you know, they obviously talk about the raven and the wolf and the fox and the snake and the turtle and all these different animals. But what's interesting is when they refer to these things, we get stuff like the first ones or the old ones.
Yeah.
And they're not talking about a common animal. They're talking about a tribe. These were the first ones. It's an ancient relic tribe that they admit were there long before they came on the scene. And they're still here, which is what's fascinating. Obviously, as time goes on and we encroach more and more into the wilderness, expanding our housing and whatnot, they must be retreating, I'd imagine. And my concern is they're getting segregated into isolated clans or what have you.
Yeah.
And here's the thing: extinction is not defined by the death of the last of a species. There is a practical extinction that happens when any species gets below a couple hundred of that species, because in a case like that, you end up with issues of inbreeding and genetic issues to where they lead to the extinction before they're all gone. It's a foregone conclusion when you don't have enough mating pairs with genetic diversity. So, but I don't know if I answered your question correctly, Jen. I mean, you say, what are the legends? I mean, there's tons of them.
Yeah. Yeah. There's
more
different
specific
names. And, well, I mean, I'm really interested in that subject. I mean, I even heard about even legends of little people, you know. they're not really the same creature, but of course with Bigfoot, to keep them happy, you give them offerings, and it was the same thing for little people. So
Mm-hmm.
I just find those legends fascinating. So.
Well, what's interesting in that, and you're right, they have, like I said, they had to live with them symbiotically, and so let's be honest, there was a whole lot more real estate around back then, and it was a lot easier to go, okay, this is our village, and you have that area, and we'll stay over here. But they obviously did intertwine at different times, and it was not uncommon for them to leave offerings of salmon or venison on the outside of the village to as a way of hopefully keeping them out of the village, just kind of an offering, if you will. But there have been stories of kidnappings, especially of women and children, and some as recently as the 1950s on the Colville Indian Reservation. Interesting story of the Colville Indian tribe would set up when the salmon runs came through. They would set up a temporary encampment alongside the river where they were expecting the salmon to come through, and the men would get the fish and bring it back to the village, and the women would clean them and fillet them and lay them out to dry in the sun, and they would do this for several weeks while the fish were coming through. And in this one particular case at the Colvilles, they had heard a young woman scream, and they all came running, and she had gone down to this smaller stream to get some water, and apparently encountered a Bigfoot who picked her up and was carrying her off. And they saw this, but were too afraid to follow. And she was smart enough. She was wearing a white dress, and she was smart enough to tear small pieces of it off every so often, in hopes that she would leave a trail that they could eventually follow and rescue her. And there were several weeks that went by before they were ready to fold up camp and move back to their main village. And they decided, let's take one last try and look for her before we go back to the village. And they found these pieces of cloth, and they followed them, and they came up in a meadow where they said they had found her. She was on her knees picking or digging up what they call tubers, roots of plants that they eat. I believe it was wapato, and putting them in her skirt, collecting a bunch of them. And nearby, allegedly, there was a Bigfoot that was sleeping in the sun. And they got her attention and motioned her over, and she crawled over to where they were on horseback and jumped on back, and they took off with her. And she had some stories to tell. She had spent several weeks with this thing, and as the story goes, she ended up pregnant. Yeah. And so apparently bore an offspring. Patrick was what they named him, and they called him a pinhead. He was a hybrid, I guess. But the interesting thing was he had the intelligence of a human child, but the strength of a full-grown man. They called him a pinhead because his skull was shaped somewhat conical, if you will.
Yeah.
And this guy apparently went on to lead a fairly normal life, was educated, westernized, actually ran a ranch at one time on the reservation, and he died at a fairly young age in his 30s, but he's said to be buried out there on the Colville Reservation. But he was very, very distinctly different from anybody else. And So, I mean, but if you go back through Native American lore, you'll find a lot of examples of alleged kidnappings and whatnot. I don't know why, maybe out of curiosity or whatever, but anyhow, there's plenty of stories out there. If I could, I've got to put in a little plug here for a friend of mine who recently published a book, because this guy saved me about 10 years of research in Native American lore on the Bigfoot. He's got this book out, and I think it's available on Amazon. I've purchased 10 copies that I have that I give to friends or whatnot, or people that I know that are interested. But you're going to kill me because I can't think of the title because it's pretty long. It's long-winded, but I'll tell you, his name is very unique. His last name is Faller, and that's Phaller. His first name is Leon. And this is a big 8.5 by 11 textbook size book. Wow. In the margins, you'll find all the tribes that you can think of. I mean, some I not only have never heard of, but can hardly pronounce. But in every case, it's across the country. He's got quotes out of books, and it's all footnoted and has a good bibliography to it. But what Leon did is just amazing, because here I've studied maybe 5 tribes, and he's done probably 150. Oh, wow. So, but I do believe it's available on Amazon. If you just look up Leon Faller, Phaller, it's literally one of the best resources for Native American encounters and information on Bigfoot.
Oh, he'd be an interesting. Yeah, he'd be an interesting guest too. But while we're talking about Native American Bigfoot kidnap narratives, and when we're talking about Native American relationships with Bigfoot, period, it makes me think of David Paulides' Tribal Bigfoot, and then it also instantly, of course, makes me think of Missing 411. And one of although Paulides himself has never come out and said so, in fact, he often says he doesn't know what it is or he can't draw a conclusion. Clearly, a lot of people have suggested that some of those Missing 411 accounts might be related to a modern Bigfoot kidnap epidemic, I guess, for lack of a better term. Do you think this is still going on today, that Bigfoot might be taking people? Or?
Well, yeah, and I know David, and I've read his books and seen some of the TV shows he's been on. To an extent, with all due respect to Mr. Paulides, I think some of them may be, but certainly not everybody that mysteriously disappears. I mean, there's 101 ways to get lost and die from exposure or what have you in the wilderness. And it's been happening, for as long as we've been around. There's a lot of dangerous things out there. It's easy to get injured to a degree that you can't extricate yourself. Many of these places are not, at least in modern day times, are not within cell phone range. Squatch happens. Things happen. It's possible. I don't know if it's to the degree David thinks it is, but I mean, it sells books, and it's fascinating to consider the possibilities. But if this is a pattern of behavior that they've exhibited, through millennia of Native American lore, then I don't see why they would necessarily stop. These things are very curious of us. There's no saying that you don't find Bigfoot, Bigfoot finds you. Mm-hmm. And I firmly believe that it's a rare occasion that anybody looking for Bigfoot actually finds them. It seems by and large the people that encounter them were not looking for them in the first place. Mm-hmm. And by the time they do realize there's something there, it's because these things have been observing them, for quite some time, and there's, you got to understand that people tend to stereotype these things, and I think they're misguided because go to a mall, go to Walmart. No, don't go there. But I mean, if you want to see a variety of people,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
All you have to do is get in a large crowd of people and look, and not just different body shapes and sizes, and but characters, different personalities, and I can't help but think that as easy as it is to, or tempting as it is to personify them, or I should say, I don't know, romanticize them. Let's be real. There are good people. There are bad people. There are really good people, and there are really, really bad, serial killers. And for that matter, good people have bad days, right? So I don't think these things are anything different. I mean, if they are somewhat related to us, at least in the hominid arena, which I think they are, I think these would fall somewhere in the line of Cro-Magnon or Neanderthal or Desovian, that, and perhaps just an offshoot of that. But nature is a survival of the fittest, and I don't know anything out there that's more fit or adaptable to survival than these things. I think they've just made it farther than some of our other hominid ancestors. But getting back to your question with regards to behavior or bad behavior, we're all capable of it. I think there's good Bigfoot. I think there's bad Bigfoot. I think there's, good ones that have bad days. It's just, I think they're as varied as the three of us, right? So I think it's best to keep that in mind, because people, I tell people they want to go out there, they want to see these things, and I'm like, that's to them their goal, that's their end point, and I just tell them, it is not the end, it is the beginning, and you better be careful what you ask for. You don't know what you're dealing with. It's suffice to say, from a physical standpoint, they have the advantage, and to try to prepare yourself for that before you go out in the field. Don't just go, oh, there he is, here's my picture, and I'm going to go by, because you don't know how they're going to react. Every animal can be dangerous, especially if they're quartered, or if they have offspring, or if they're injured or what have you. It's just, I know I'm going off on a bit of a tangent, but getting back to the kidnapping thing, if they did it before, there's no reason to think that they wouldn't do it again. I think of the 1924 Albert Otzman kidnapping, if you will. And it sounds like you know where I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. Where they carried him off and almost treated him like a pet for several days before he was able to escape. They were fascinated by him. I think they're still fascinated by us, but they're very leery of us, and for good cause.
I know I won't even go out into my back 40 here. I live in the woods, but I won't even go out there without at least a sidearm. When you go out looking for Sasquatch, or when you're in the field, are you normally armed, or do you recommend people be armed when they go in those kind of situations?
Well, anytime you go into a wilderness situation, Bigfoot or otherwise, I live myself in the Cascade Mountain Range, about 50 miles east of Portland. Yes. Be prepared at all times. If you don't have to take it off your hip, then great. But if you need to, it's there are animals outside of Bigfoot out there. We just recently had a cougar last year take down a jogger and ate her. And it's one of the first cougar fatalities in Oregon. And that wasn't very far from my place. I've heard cougar, but I've had black bear more than once, not just in my yard, but on my deck. Yeah, the true story. That's part of, we're in their territory. And it's just not, Bigfoot, but there are other things out there that can hurt you if they want to. So a lot of people I talk to say, "Oh no, you're not going to see him if you carry a gun," or they know what it is. I really don't believe that, especially if it's concealed, But again, better to be err on the side of caution.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I do carry myself. I carry a 357 Magnum, and I want to give you a bit of a side story, if I could, about.
Sure.
I went up in 1998 to the south slope of Saddle Mountain, which is close to where I had my sighting, and I was very fortunate enough to have both Peter Byrne and Ron Moorhead, friends of mine at the time, on that team. For the most part, it was just the three of us. And we set up a base camp at the bottom of this mountain in a elk field. And I had brought 12 gauge shotgun with slugs, 9mm sidearm, and a Weatherby 300 Magnum, right? Well, Ron had flown his private plane to the nearest town airport, which was in Seaside, a good 30-minute drive from where we were. And we had hoped to use it for aerial reconnaissance. And but the weather was just sucked in. It was horrible. It was just on the verge of snowing the whole time we were there. It was just nasty. And so on day 6 of 8 of the expedition, there was a little break in the weather, and Ron said, I have instrument rating, I got my own plane. He says, but I'd prefer to get out where we got this window on, visual flight rules. And so Peter gave him a ride down to Seaside. And I knew I had about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours before Peter returned. And I had these seismic ground sensors I had borrowed from the North American Science Institute that they detect vibration in the ground. And I thought, well, this would be a good time to put those up. I got time to kill. I'm all by myself. So I go up there unarmed. I don't know what I was thinking. We're like day 6. I'm like, nothing's really going on. We've heard a few things and saw a few things, but So I go up there with this kit of 8 seismic ground sensors, and I got a couple of them in the ground before I noticed a hailstorm was coming in. And so I took refuge up into the old growth firs, figured I'd use those for umbrellas and wait this thing out. I figured it would pass shortly, and then I'd get back to work. Well, while I was up there, I had to answer the call of nature, to put it PG. Anyway, so I did, and I'm buckling my trousers and my belt, and now this is the closest I've ever been to these things. From about my 10 o'clock this direction, I hear the most ear-splitting roar, almost a scream roar, if you will. Remember the MGM lion when you're watching a movie, right? Mm-hmm. Picture cranking that up to about 20. And you could feel it. You could literally feel the shockwaves from this thing. And it went on for maybe really only 3 seconds, but it was the longest 3 seconds of my life because I swear to God, I could not move. I could not. I always thought the term paralyzed with fear was like a euphemism, but no, trust me, it's real. I couldn't move. I mean, as much as I wanted to run, there was something more, I don't know, primal that said, if you want to live, do not move. Don't blink. Don't turn your head. And it was really one of the most, if not the most frightening time I've ever had. And I've been in Iraq and shot at with rockets and missiles and mortars and bullets. And I've jumped out of perfectly good working aircraft. And I have never been, I told a friend of mine who had a similar experience, close range like that. Like, I'm telling you, this thing was less than 70 feet away from me, but it stayed behind this hedge. But there was no question, it was right there. And I really believe the reason it reacted like it did was due to my marking its territory, if you will.
Oh, that makes sense.
And I've heard about 5 or 6 different accounts where something crazy like that happened when they were, taking a leak. So the thing is, I told this to a friend of mine. I said, because he had one chase him, and I mean, it got close enough that he could hear it breathing behind him, and he was too afraid to turn around and look at it. And his wife even saw it, and she's like screaming at him, "Run, run, run!" And he couldn't run. And I said, and so I'm like, we're comparing notes, and I'm like, dude, I'm telling you, I never felt so helpless in my life. And he looked at me and he said, "No, not helpless, hopeless." And when he said that, I went, wow.
Jeez.
I wasn't lacking help. I was lacking hope. I mean, I was literally praying. I was like, God, just make it happen fast. Just get it over with. The worst part was standing there for 2 minutes and nothing happening. And I'm still torn between whether I wish the thing would have at least showed itself. It might have just made it worse. I don't know. But anyway.
Do you think there was an infrasound element to that, Todd? Because I hear people talk about potentially there's, and when you were talking about being paralyzed and feeling it, I mean, I don't know. I'm just asking what your take on that is.
Yeah, I've heard the term zapped used, and I'm very familiar with infrasound, and there may have been a component of that in there. I don't know. I just know how it affected me. I really don't think I blinked. I was just but I will say this, my body, and I just assume it was adrenaline, but my body was just buzzing like I was hooked up to a battery. I've never felt that way, really. I was just, the only, real analogy, I think, for your viewers to, compare to is, imagine being pushed out of a plane at 20,000 feet and you have now, seriously, you have no parachute.
Yeah.
Now, you don't just die. No. You sit there or, fall and having skydived before, it's not you going to the ground. It's more like the ground's coming up at you. It's the way it just, it feels like. But I mean, you now have 2 minutes of hang time and you know how this movie ends. And, you're at a point where you just hope you have a heart attack before you hit the ground. Not that you're going to feel it, but you just want it over. This is the hopelessness that I felt. I knew that this thing was in control, that this thing was in charge, and it had the power of life or death over me. And fortunately, I think he made its point, and I think it realized that and just had grace and mercy on me and let it go at that. But here I am. We were talking about going out in the woods with weapons, and I'm thinking, I've got this arsenal down here at the base camp, but I got too complacent. I got too comfortable, and I let my guard down. And I went up there, and quite frankly, I would question whether or not I would shoot one. Whether it would even be effective, to be honest with you, and if it weren't, or if you didn't hit it in a vital spot, you might as well save one round for yourself.
I know when you mentioned you were with Ron Moorhead on that expedition, and I don't know Ron Moorhead, and I'm not even that, I know who he is, but I'm not that familiar with his work. But I believe I heard recently he's turned a little bit more to a paraphysical interpretation, which reminded me of something, Jen, you said you wanted to ask Todd when it came to Native American belief. Was there a spiritual aspect, I think you're going to ask him, or a less than physical aspect anyway? Right.
Because, I mean, the new popular thing now with paranormal researchers is that a lot of them are linking them as interdimensional beings, because a lot of people will see, some of them, not a lot, but I've heard a lot of stories of either they'll see a light in the sky and then a Bigfoot shows up, or a Bigfoot and then the lights in the sky. So they're like interlinking, I don't know, aliens to Bigfoot.
Or are they looking at a Bigfoot and it suddenly disappears, or appears out of nowhere? It's a fair question, and I, doing this for as long as I have, you can't help but run across people with these, and if there's one, person, you write them off as a crackpot or whatever, but I've heard it from many different people, and I've known Ron for many years. We've gone on a couple of expeditions, including down at Bluff Creek, California, with Peter, and Ron's gone. He's taken a different track. His last book was called Quantum Bigfoot. And so what Ron is trying to do, and I've seen it before, and with all due respect to Ron, he's looking for alternatives to what we have yet to be able to, nail down. And I've talked to Ron about it, and he's traveled the world. He's done a lot of research on things other than Bigfoot, So the way Ron's just explained it to me is, he says quantum physics is something that we've had around for ever. I mean, Einstein and even Galileo and Newton all had theories based upon, say, mathematical formulas. In other words, through math and science and experimentation, there are certain actions or behaviors or processes that mathematically are possible, but technologically may not. For instance, he brought up microwaves. He said microwaves were known about back at the turn of the century, or last century even, mathematically, in dealing with sound waves. And it was already understood of what was possible, but we never were able to catch up technologically with the equipment to make it happen. And it just so happened that somebody was experimenting with radar around World War II, and they realized, hey, we can bounce sound waves at a certain frequency, and if they hit something, they'll come back, and we're able to measure that. And in the process, apparently one of these scientists had a sack lunch there close to the equipment. I was told it was a cheese sandwich, and they realized, hey, my cheese is melting. And so microwave ovens that we appreciate today didn't come about through, hey, let's make a microwave oven. It came about through this scientist playing with these hypotheses and mathematical theories. And so this is kind of where he's coming from when it comes to Bigfoot. He's like, hey, maybe there's something about these things that we just don't understand yet. Well, okay. Again, with all due respect to Ron, I'm trying to keep, and I'm not a scientist, but I'm trying to keep it more of a scientific mind to, okay, fine. People are seeing lights in the sky or orbs. Mm-hmm. People are seeing eye shine, right? Mm-hmm. Eye glow in the dark.
Yeah.
Okay. And I can tell you about that because I got egg on my face. People talk about how they can see them and all of a sudden they can't, or they didn't see them and all of a sudden they appear. Mm-hmm. I'm working on a thesis right now to address that. And I really think the key, and again, I'm just trying to think of a more terrestrial answer to what we're dealing with. Mm-hmm. I'm working on a theory that I believe the answer lies in their hide, their coat, if you will, their hair. I've seen a couple of hair samples under microscope. Two really jumped out at me. One was you had a kind of a sample of a patch of hair. Again, it's backlit with white light under the microscope. Mm-hmm. And in this one example I'm thinking about, these hairs are kind of, lapped over each other. Some of those hairs were translucent. Mm-hmm. And it struck me because you could see through one hair and see a solid dark hair below it, as clear as the hair wasn't even there. I mean, you really only kind of seeing the outline of the translucent hair over this black hair, but you can clearly see the black hair through this translucent hair. And it got me thinking along the lines of fiber optics. Okay, we know if I get a string of fiber optic line, I could tie it in a knot. I can do all kinds of things to it. But if I touch a light to one end to it, no matter what configuration it is, I'm going to get a light come out the other end. Mm-hmm. That's how fiber optics work. Okay. So I've actually purchased about 100 feet of fiber optic cable. And my thought being, I want to get some kind of hide, whether it's a genuine hide or just a synthetic hide or whatnot, take a picture of it in different settings. And then I want to maybe put it attach it to, say, burlap or something, and start feeding some of these fiber optic, maybe even like a certain monofilament fishing line would work just as well. Uh-huh. But thread this through the fur, and then move it into different lighting conditions and see if these translucent hair, I wouldn't say the whole thing is translucent, but maybe even a certain percentage of it, if it would not absorb not just the light, but the colors that surrounds it and transmit that color through those translucent hairs, if you will. Yeah. And in a sense, make the ultimate camouflage.
Yeah.
Especially if they're sitting still. Because now a certain percentage of the hair is absorbing the colors and lights from everything around it through these clear shafts of hair. And I'll give you an example in nature that we do have. Most people don't know that, you look at a polar bear, they're white as the snow, right? Mm-hmm. And that's great. It's perfect camouflage. It's natural. It works great. If you've ever seen a polar bear that had been skinned, or, if you shaved one, their skin is black. Huh. Absolutely black. It's the hair that picks up and transmits and reflects the snow around them that makes them appear white.
Yeah.
Jeez, I didn't
Now, I'm
know
not
that.
encouraging anybody to go out there and scan a polar bear. I you know, especially a live one. But no, it's true. And we look at throughout nature, there are certain animals that have camouflage capabilities, whether it's an octopus or a chameleon or what have you. They're out there. The other hair sample that really intrigued me, again, a patch of hair under microscope with white backlighting. It was really interesting. Again, just, purported to be Bigfoot related, but I've never seen hair like this where the scaling, you've got the cortex, the core that goes through it, and anyway, a lot of what you can tell, describe an animal or associate hair to an animal is the outside of the hair. And in this case, I'd never seen anything like this. It looked like it had microscopic glitter embedded. I don't know, it was a mineral that just came through, but this hair had, and because it was under white light having the presence of all color, it looked like a rainbow of glitter. And you would never see it with the naked eye. If you're just holding up a hair and looked at it, you wouldn't see it. But under a microscope, you see this, which leads me to believe, what about light refraction? Imagine if you had a million little tiny mirrors, but unseeable by eyesight, but embedded on the outside of, again, doesn't have to be all the hairs. Maybe it could be part, we've got dogs that have seasonal guard hairs that grow beyond the year-round, whatever. I don't know. It's just a thought. If I had a bunch of little mirrors that were embedded on the outside of my hair and I'm not moving, would they not reflect all the color around me and help me to blend in? So, it's just a couple things I'm doing, and it's not to rain on the parade of the woo, if you will. It's just that I've heard enough of it that I can't simply dismiss it out of hand, but I'm trying to find some normal, natural reason to understand it.
Yeah.
And if I can, I don't know how much time we've got left, but I have to go back to where I told you I had egg on my face. I had heard about the whole eye shine thing, and in fact, I'd been in touch with a friend of mine for a couple of years on a reservation, and he had shown me video he had taken in pitch blackness, and he'd say, "There they are," and you would see these lights in pitch blackness in the distance, usually, like a pair of eyes. And you could see them move a little bit left and right. Sometimes they would back off. Sometimes they'd come forward, and they would change in intensity. And I'm like, again, put that on the got to see it to believe it list. Yeah. Well, he showed me some images last October that were so phenomenal that I got on the next plane and I flew out to the reservation, and I spent over a week with him. And he took me out in the field in his research area. And I got to tell you, guys, he would go out there and he'd speak in his native tongue initially. He'd say, "Oho, kage," which meant hello, friend. Yeah. And then he would say, "Gigaho," which means come closer. And I'd see these eyes, one over here. I'm looking at it. I'm like, no way.
Holy, oh my goodness.
I'm like, what the hell's that? We don't have lights on the car. We don't have lights. We don't have flashlights on. There's no lights. Yeah. It's just almost an abandoned road in the middle of nowhere along the Missouri River. I'm like, am I really seeing this? Right? And then all of a sudden over here, two more eyes come on, or lights. No, I can't. I can't at this point say for certain their eyes, but then he would talk to them both in native tongue and in English as well. And he would speak to them and they would stick around. And then all of a sudden there might be a third set of eyes. And you're like, come on, really? And I've got it on my phone right here, you know. But what really convinced me that whatever I was seeing, whatever phenomena that was happening, were our friends because of the vocalizations that we got on several occasions. There was this one, I can only assume it was a female, and this was on day one, night one, I should say. We were out there from we wouldn't even get out there till midnight. And we'd be out to 2 or 3 in the morning. I was sleeping into 11 o'clock or noon, you know, and then going right back at it. We did, I'm telling you, 5 nights in a row with absolute consistency, and in 2 locations, mind you, because one evening we weren't getting a lot of activity. He says, get in the car, I'm going to take you to a place like 3 or 4 miles from here that I've had activity. And so we went off through the Tules. I mean, I'm surprised the rental car company didn't sue me, because I should not have had this out there, right? I'm like, where are you taking? I can't even see the road.
Yeah.
You know, through the tall grass, and just keep going straight. We got out there at this other location, and sure enough, within like a minute at the most, all of a sudden, blink. I'm like, holy crap, we're miles from where we just were. How does this happen, right? And I saw one. We stopped in partway down this road and turned off all the light stuff, and it was like, it appeared to be down the road maybe 100 feet. And then we had a second set of eyes at about our 3 o'clock trying to kind of sneak around us.
Jeez.
And at one point I said to him, I said, hey, have you ever just like walked up to him? This native guy, this is his turf. And he goes, are you crazy? And I went, I swear to God, I don't know what I was just getting frustrated. I said, hold my beer. He's like, what? And I'm not kidding. I'm walking down the road, and it's fall. It's October, so the leaves are crunching, and I'm just like, I'm looking at this set of eyes, and I'm just walking for it. I'm just like, whatever. Yeah. I'm just going for it. And I got about halfway to it, and they blinked out. They left, I guess. I don't know. But he still talks about it this day. He goes, a freaking crazy white man. I don't know what you know. So, but no. So so now I got a whole nother thesis to work on. I'm trying to look at bioluminescence in nature and how anything can generate light. I mean, generate it from their eyes and not end up blinding themselves in the process. I don't think they're projecting anything. I did not, if they turned their head, I wouldn't see like a beam or anything going like, it was just like it was in their eyes. But like I said, I've heard this, what I was talking about a second ago, it's this female, it sounded like she started singing. I mean, she carried this tune for like 5 or 6 seconds, and then it would take a 10-second break. And I'm like, wow, that was, and all of a sudden she start up again. Another 8 to 10-second break. She did like 4 times in a row. Every time was extremely high pitched, had very distinct separate notes. And every time she repeated it, it was the same. And I looked at my friend, I go, that's beautiful. That's freaking beautiful. Is she singing? And he goes, I guess, I don't know. And another time during broad daylight, when I tried to go out there and put out a tape recorder, she did it again in broad daylight.
Do you have the tape or?
Well, you're gonna hate me. You know what a Tascam is?
I've heard the phrase.
It's a digital recorder.
Okay.
Oh,
and because it's digital, it can. I think there's no like Zoom or something makes one too, but they because they're digital, they can record for like 3 days straight.
Yeah.
I hate to even admit this on the air, but so I hadn't used it in a while. I went out there. I walked out to where I assumed they were standing when we were seeing them. And I went to turn it on, and I hit the button, and the red light came on, and I'm like, awesome. And I set it down, face down, in case it was raining. I didn't want the controls to get wet. I put it between this crotch of these two oak trees, and I stood up. And right as I stood up is when she started singing in broad daylight. Because I'm thinking, well, I know they're active tonight. They got to sleep sometime. No, she was out there, and she's singing to me, and I'm like, oh my God. And then I turned and started walking back to my rental car, and I got maybe 20 steps, and I hear 10 times that loud, like rapid.
Yeah.
I could only think tree knocking, but I've heard time as fast as it was like that quick and twice as loud. I'm trying to just picture how this thing's like hitting a tree and being able to wind up a swing to hit it that fast, but it was just like pop, 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 pop. And I'm like, okay, sorry, I'm out of here. Well, I go back to get the recorder the next day, and I pick it up, and I'm like, awesome. And I get on the plane to go home, and I plug it. I'm going to listen to this thing. I got probably, who knows how many hours to listen to, but I figure I only got to get through the first couple of minutes to hear that knocking and nothing. And then I looked at the damn thing, and I'm like, why is this? So with a Tascam, you push this button once and the red light comes on. I forgot you have to push it a second time to where the red light's flashing.
Oh, no.
To where it's actually recording.
Oh,
so
no.
I don't know. I think I was just kind of the excitement of because I'm like walking out there, and I'm by myself. And so I hit it. The light came on. I go, awesome. And I'm like, I'm out of here. And so, live and learn. But anyway, next time.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, now as we start to wind down, though, I'd love to hear of any upcoming appearances or projects or things you'd like to let our audience know about.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, one thing I'm kind of proud of on a personal basis is this gathering I put together called Beachfoot. It's a play on the name of the fact that obviously Bigfoot, but the fact that we hold it in the Oregon Coast Range, which I'm actually in right now. I did a little traveling today. But Beachfoot is a concept that I came up with in 2008. By that time, I had been, kind of networking with a lot of people and sharing the stage with a number of people far more important than I. And I realized there were some certain rivalries. I don't know, it was jealousy or competition or what, but person A didn't like person B, but I liked them both. And I don't know why they can't get along. And, so I just thought, God, if I could just get them all together in one room and grab them by the collar, and then I thought, you know what? I think what would be cooler would be if I could get them in a casual outdoor setting around a huge bonfire for 3 or 4 days with a adult beverage in their hand and force them to live together and get to know each other. I really think it would just, it would, make things a lot more palatable, and maybe they would, maybe have a better understanding and network and, share information. And so it was in 2008 that I had this little brainstorm, and I put the first one together and called, Around the Horn. And no, this is not like any other conference because it's not open to the public. We don't do it for profit. We I could sell tickets and have 500 people there, especially with the caliber of people that I have there. But I basically it's serious Bigfoot researchers only no media, no vendors, no, it's just where they don't have to entertain anybody, but they're in a gathering of their own constituents, their own type, and get to know each other and share. And it's interesting because we limit it to 100 people, and these people normally get paid to go to conferences where they get all their lodging and flight and meals and a stipend or what have you, pay their way to get there, transportation. And in some cases, I mean, we've had people from Australia, Russia, England, New Zealand, and all across the U.S. and Canada fly in on their own dime and then pay to get into the venue, but that's just we figured the budget and count heads and divvy it up. It's pass the plate kind of thing, and nobody's making money. But it's just kind of taken on a life of its own, and this year is going to mark our 14th year.
Congratulations!
In fact, thank you. It's coming up in about 2 weeks. Ron and Peter will both be there. In fact, I'm interviewing Peter tomorrow. My first blog talk,
wow.
It's totally accidental. I actually was asked to speak with this guy that does these, and he says, I'm given 2 hours a week, and why don't I just give you one of them and see what you can do? So it'll be my chance to be on your side of the microphone, I guess. but who better than to have the infamous Peter Byrne?
Yeah, the last of the Four Horsemen.
Well, that's exactly, and that's why I'm down here. And I knew all the Four Horsemen, by the way, personally.
Oh.
And but yeah, he's the last of them.
What's the address? How can people listen to that show tomorrow? Can you point us at it now so people can hear?
I wasn't going to say anything because I didn't want to impose on
No,
but
I'm sure
it's
everybody would
called.
love to hear it.
I've got my calendar right here. All those red circles are interviews, but this one. So I guess. So I like this. The name of his show is called Freaking Awesome Show. Don't you wish you would have thought of that first?
Yeah, it's a great title.
Freaking Awesome Show. And I get it, and they have it on iTunes. It's live. So I would just suggest. So he's going to take from 5 to 6, where I guess he's going to be interviewing me. And he says, I'm turning it over to you at 6, and you've got 6 to 7. So I'm calling mine. I think I can send you a link because he finally sent me something.
Please do. We'll share it on our social.
I'm calling mine "Living Large Bigfoot in America," and my one and only guest is going to be Peter Byrne.
And is that 6? Did you say that was 6 p.m.? Is that Pacific time?
Pacific, yeah, from 6 to 7. So you might want to tune in a wee bit early just to make sure, because I'm so nervous right now. I just afraid of technical issues but we'll work it out. But yeah, so I'll have soon to be 95-year-old Peter Byrne, and we've gone on many expeditions, just him and I sometimes. And I feel very honored and blessed to call him a friend. And
indeed.
So this will be fun. Obviously, I'll feel comfortable with him, But yeah, thanks for the plug. But yeah, so the only way I can tell you, well, maybe I can send it to you and you can put it out there.
Yeah, we will. Send me the link.
I got it on my phone because I just saw it before I got online with you folks. But yeah, so what else is going on? I've got an expedition on Vancouver Island in mid-July, where we're going to be helicoptered from Campbell River to a very remote high point on the island. Apparently there's where 3 different watersheds split off, and there's been some activity up there. And depending how long we're up there, we may need to be resupplied partway through. But I'm going up with a First Nations bush guide that I took on my expedition in 2016. which I called Operation Sea Monkey.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you've heard of it, but we went out, spent 6 days in the Broughton Archipelago investigating different islands every day, every night mostly. So he was along for that, and he's putting this together. I'm also going on an expedition that is going to be spread between northern Louisiana, Arkansas, maybe Oklahoma. And I guess this was just a podcast I was on, and these guys were talking about, again, they're mainly dogmen people, but they're like, bring all your toys, it all works. And they're talking about possibly making a 3-part mini-series out of that.
Bring the silver bullets to that one, Todd.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I wouldn't have thought of that. Thank you. For sure. And then, I don't know. I've got 4 conferences I've been asked to speak at in the next few months in Idaho, Ohio, Arkansas, Texas, somewhere else. Maybe Alaska. We'll see.
If you want to send me those details as well, I'll put them in the show notes so people.
Oh, thank you.
No problem. Click through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm still trying to update my calendar, but so that's going on. I'll be going to the conference at Medellin Falls, Washington, just before Beachfoot, which is close to the Canadian border in Northeast. So I'm not speaking there, but I'm just looking at my calendar. Anyway, it should be. It's just been fun. I mean, I'm so glad I'm retired. I've never been so busy in my life.
Well, it's good to keep busy. I think you broke the record for the longest time we've had a run with a guest on. We've almost hit an hour and a half. We're normally an hour.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So fast.
You're in the Talking Weird book of records now. We'd love to have you back too. I could have easily gone for another half hour. I know, because Jan and I were talking about other questions we had, but we'll do that another day if you.
Well, let's do it again.
Yeah,
that'd be great. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Todd, and you keep it weird, mate.
Yes, thank you.
Always. All right. You take care, guys. We'll see you again.
Yeah.
Bye.
All right. Good night.
Thank you for joining us tonight. If you're interested in checking out more episodes, you can find us at talkingweird.com. If you haven't already, please like the show on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Talking Weird Podcast. Make sure you never miss an episode by subscribing to Talking Weird. We're available on most podcast platforms and YouTube. And if you do enjoy the show, please leave us a review. Dean and I would really appreciate it. Until then, stay safe and keep it